Baltimore that I grew up in was a Yiddish-speaking town. All the Jews in the city spoke Yiddish, but none of them were Shomer Shabbos. There were a few exceptions. There were a few Jews from German descent who were Shomer Shabbos, and then there was the Adas. The Adas struck me as a model when I was a child of English-speaking Americans that were Shomer Shabbos and Medaktik, Kekalo, Kibachamur. This group of Americans were the kernel of everything that grew in Baltimore. The TA, the mikveh, yeshiva, and kol dover shebekadusha in this city. My first recollection of Adas Yisrael is the shul they had in the Utah Place area. I think it was Madison Avenue, I don't remember, headed by Mara Siegel, Zechon Livrocha. He organized a youth group that met every Shabbos afternoon, and my friends and I all met to be inspired. Mara Siegel, by his Divrei Torah and his stories, and other people, his brother Chester Siegel, Zechon Livrocha. And we ourselves were often given the opportunity to give a speech as well. It was very, very, very influential on us as we grew up. They also organized a Shabbos group on the Color Street Shul, led by a Slabotka Talmud called Rab Helfan, Zechon Livrocha. Also was very influential in giving me an Abbas HaTorah, giving me a Geschmack in Divrei Torah. He used to speak to us Divrei Torah every week and ask us questions, and it was very influential on me. This tradition of starting Shabbos groups began at the very inception of Adas. There was, as you know, there was a young girl, a teenage girl called Ray Mechanic, who wanted to counteract the influence of the Christian missionaries that were ensnaring Jewish children in East Baltimore. And she organized a Shabbos group, even though she never went to Beis Yaakov. But she got stories and learned a little bit about Chumash with them to get them to stay away from those missionaries. And this group that she organized became the kernel of Adas. They grew up, they married each other, and they created this organization which was so influential in the development of Baltimore Jewry. Adas should have the largest membership in Baltimore. It's probably the oldest shul, but its members are part and fabric of all the other institutions in the city. Its children grew to be Rabbitzei Torah in Baltimore and in other places in the country. Choshev Balabatim, and an enormous influence in Yiddishkeit. Adas shows what changes a small but dedicated group, which does things the Shem Shemayim can accomplish. This small group, which was begun by Ray Mechanic and Hurley Shmo, made Baltimore into one of the most potent influences in American Jewry, one of the nicest towns in America. It's all zecher to the Shmo of this group of Adas B'nai Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu help them to go Michayil el Chayil, and maybe all be zecher together to greet Mashiach Tzidkenu.
From 1880 to 1925, about 2,650,000 Jewish immigrants came to America from Eastern and Southern Europe. Most settled on the east side of New York City, but some made their way to the port of Baltimore, Maryland. By 1924, about 65,000 Jews lived in Baltimore, mostly centered around the Lombard Street area on the east side of town. Known as the Yerushalayim of America, Baltimore in the early 20s was home to a number of well-attended shuls with Torah learning, but many Jewish immigrant families found it hard to make a living and uphold their Jewish values and traditions at the same time. Most were not able to keep Shabbos, and their children, off from school on Saturday, were looking for things to do. Christian missionaries took advantage of this and sought to influence Jewish children and teenagers by showing movies with refreshments on Shabbos afternoons. Seeing the alarming success of the missionaries, one Jewish teenage girl named Ray Mechanic decided to counter their activities with Jewish alternatives to bring the children back to Shabbos observance. She brought a group of like-minded Jewish young men and women together to form an Orthodox social action organization to strengthen Shabbos observance and kashrus in Baltimore. Active members included Morris Siegel, Abe Chin, Louis Kaplan, Leon Rifkin, Sam Kravitsky, Max Shavrik, and others. They called the organization Adas2010 Israel. Its first home was 114 Asquith Street.
Jewish life in Baltimore at that time was thought to be that Orthodoxy was not going to survive. And it was, that's why the Adas, I think, was originally started, and their policy was Judaism in general and the Sabbath in particular. The thing that drew me into the Adas mostly was the policy of the Adas, who welcomed all the free bar mitzvah boys, where the Adas actually did everything to draw us into keeping Shabbos the way it should be kept. Well, in my life, it was certainly one of the things that helped keep me a Shemer Shabbos. It provided me with my wife, who I've been married now for 67 years. There was Chester Morris Siegel, O.D. Tarragon, Fella Berkowitz. There was a whole group of young men that kept the Adas going in those days until Rabbi Davis came and took over.
The Adas members organized large public meetings to talk about the holiness of Shabbos and the importance of following Jewish law. Long before anyone knew the word kiruv, they formed youth groups offering special Ongei Shabbos, singing Zmiros, Sunday picnics, boating trips, and other fun events to attract young people from non-observant families back to Yiddishkeit. The Adas even had an employment bureau to help people who were Shomer Shabbos find jobs and make a living. This new organization, formed by young people, became the heart and center of Orthodox Jewry in Baltimore. They were swimming against the tide as their peers scoffed and chided them, saying Shabbos was a relic of the old country, to be discarded and replaced by Saturday, a day off to have fun, American style. But the Adas members refused to leave Shabbos in the old country. They held fast to Shabbos, cherishing and celebrating it as a precious gift from Hashem. With tremendous moral strength and self-sacrifice for the sake of Torah, the young Adas members reversed the trend toward assimilation. Many met their spouses at Adas events, and together succeeded in keeping Yiddishkeit alive in their children and grandchildren, who today are Torah-observant Jews, Torah scholars, rabbis, and heads of yeshivas. Some of the children who attended the Adas's early youth groups went on to study at well-known European yeshivos, such as Slobodka, Telz, and the Mir in the 1930s. Among the most well-known of those early Adas members were Harav Mordechai Gifter Zatzal, Harav Avigdor Miller Zatzal, and Harav Yehuda Davis Zatzal. Rabbi Davis would later become the Adas's first Rav in the late 30s and early 40s. The Adas was originally formed as a Jewish social organization and not a shul, but davening and Torah learning took place there also. In 1925, the Adas bought a building at 4 North Broadway, which served as its shul and meeting place for 10 years. In late 1936, the Adas relocated to 1736 East Baltimore Street. In 1938, 19 years after the Adas was started, Rabbi Yehuda Davis became the shul's first Rav, serving as its rabbi until 1943. Rabbi Davis had grown up in the Adas and had recently returned from studying at the Slobodka Yeshiva in Europe. With his tremendous passion for Torah and commitment to upholding Jewish law, Rabbi Davis helped the Adas congregants grow in Torah and halachic observance. A great role model and respected leader, Rabbi Davis raised the Adas level of Yiddishkeit to yeshiva levels. He continued and expanded the Adas tradition of kiruv, using a hands-on approach to learning, such as teaching the boys how to make their own tzitzis and how to build a sukkah. During the summers, Rabbi Davis arranged for the boys and young men to learn at a small yeshiva on Stein's farm in the country.
He made it Yiddish. He made it according to din. Boys and girls were separate, and he made sure that all of his drushes, all of his sermons that he gave, had to be with a tiny dicke geschmack in it. This is what he did. And in that way, he drew people closer to him.
After Yeshivas Chafetz Chaim moved from its 1709 East Baltimore Street location to Lower Park Heights, the Adas took over the building in 1940. The shul remained there for another 18 years with a thriving, active membership. In the mid to late 50s, the Adas made plans to merge with the Chafetz Chaim Shul located at 3702 West Rogers Avenue, which was under the leadership of Rav Mordechai Rabinowitz Zatzal. Well known for his piety and charity, Rav Rabinowitz passed away in August 1957 before being able to see the joining of the two shuls. With the merger in 1958, the Adas became known as the Chafetz Chaim Adas B'nai Israel of Baltimore. Although the Adas would not have a rabbinic leader for another 35 years, the shul was blessed to have many prominent rabbis as members throughout those years. The Adas also continued to encourage and enlist the participation of young people in davening, laning, and learning.
I used to go to the Pirchei Minyan, which started probably around 1960, maybe very late 50s. Pirchei Minyan was actually a group of guys, the young guys, used to want to get together on a Shabbos, unite together and have like achtas. People could like hone their talents. They could be about tefillah, they could be about curries. They used to have one person do one aliyah, another person does a second aliyah. Each person split up the sedra with 7 different people would be called up to lane, which was very unique at the time. And everybody could, instead of having one person do the whole thing, everybody got a break. It was like everybody had a chance to lane. David Steinharder was a person I liked to emulate. I used to remember the trup, the way he laned it, and it had an influence on me, the way he starkite and the way he did it the right way, that I felt honored to listen to him. And it was like, even back then I enjoyed listening to his laning. And always had a kiddush, quite often after the minyan. They used to have, every month I remember, in the Pirchei Minyan, they used to have a shalashudas, and quite often a malav malka after Shabbos, where people used to come and sing together, and there used to be like a speaker. There were different speakers who were very chashuv. Benjamin Steinberg from the Beis Yaakov principal used to come speak. He also actually came to the minyan Shabbos morning. Mr. Ernie Gutman came to the minyan Shabbos morning. It was a very, very nice, very nice group of people. And the Adas itself, there were a lot of chashuv to look up to. My uncle Morris Siegel was always like a very chashuv person in the Adas, who was looked up to for his Yiras Shamayim and his Yiddishkeit and his Avodas HaSibor for the community. And Max Rosen, Alav Shalom, I felt friendly with when I first started laning, which was been a pleasure for me. 35 years ago, he was the Gabbai, Max Rosen. He was also the president of the shul. Very chashuv person who was had a big influence on a lot of people in the Adas. He became from the Adas by Rabinowitz. Had a very big hashpah on Max Rosen, and there was a lot of camaraderie. That was always felt at home in the Adas. Baruch Hashem. We had rabbis. We had very chashuv rabbis. Rabbi Milakovsky, Rabbi Diskin, who spoke shalashudas a lot of times, came to the shul quite often.
As the Baltimore Jewish community moved from the Rogers Avenue area to further north up Park Heights Avenue, the Adas once again found itself looking for a new home. In 1993, the shul moved to its present location at 5915 Park Heights Avenue. Shortly thereafter, the Adas appointed Rav Shlomo Neiman Shlita as its Rav. Rabbi Neiman is the second Rav of the Adas and the first full-time rabbi to lead the shul in 49 years. With this appointment, the Adas in a way came full circle, as Rabbi Neiman is the grandson of Morris Siegel, one of the founders of the Adas. Today, the shul's membership includes fourth-generation Adas members, whose great-grandparents were active in the shul.
ever since I was a young boy, I felt part of the shul. Very much includes the younger children in the tefillah, and even after bar mitzvah, all the more so that encourages us to daven, because it's aliyah's laning. We just feel a part of the tzibur. As a fourth generation Adas member, my great-grandparents were instrumental in the founding and success of the Adas, which was originally an organization to reach out to the younger generation, to instill Yiddishkeit in the next generation. As even now, that's not the primary function of the Adas, but I still feel is by including the younger children in the tzibur, in essence, the Adas is bringing the younger generation to Yiddishkeit.
In the Adas, the children get to participate, they get to lane, not even they get to lane, they encourage them to lane. They get to be able to daven and feel part of the show. Here you feel that you're right up front, you have box seats. Other places you feel like you're on top of the stadium.
What is our Kehillah now? Our Kehillah now, Baruch Hashem, we have Hadracha. We also have a lot of shiurim. Now, Baruch Hashem, there's shiurim going on every day. Besides on Shabbos, and anytime someone has any new ideas, the Rav will bend over backwards to try and make the shiurim. We try very much. You're not supposed to talk during davening. That's halachic wise. But besides that, we don't talk during davening because you don't talk when you're in a shul, even if there wouldn't be a halacha like that. Also, we try and keep everything here very straightforward. We do not mix with politics. If someone was new here in town and would come over to me and ask me why should I come to the Adas. First of all, we have a Rav that's always available. It's more Hamish. It's definitely a smaller crowd. We try and bring everyone in as a family. We don't treat it as a shul, per se. We try and make everyone, especially the youngsters and new members, to feel right away comfortable. We try and make it we want to make it like a family. That's the yikr.
I came to the Adas in 1976. I was zeicha to be the roommate of the Rav, and when you're the roommate of the Rav, there are many advantages, but the big advantage is that you get to go to the Neiman Mishpacha for Shabbos and for all the meals. As I think everyone here knows, the Neiman's davened at the Adas. And in 1976, that was on Rogers Avenue. I really very much enjoyed going to the Adas for a few reasons. Number one, the Adas, for all those who might not know this, started davening on time. Never a minute late, but it was a very beautiful davening. It was neither too slow, it wasn't too fast either. It was just right. It was a shul where I felt very comfortable. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't ostentatious, it was plain, but at the same time it was beautiful. The davening was the way davening was supposed to be. In addition, around that time, a few years later, maybe 1978, I was thinking of going to law school. I was going to be a lawyer, but I had heard from my chaverim in Ner Yisrael some horror stories of what it meant to be a lawyer. So the Rav said to me, well, let me tell you the type of lawyer you might want to try and become. And it was Shabbos afternoon, it was mincha time, and he took me to shul 5-10 minutes before mincha. And there, I saw somebody by the name of Chaim Wallen give a shir to a bunch of balabatim, to a group of balabatim, maybe 10, shir and Gemara. But that shir and Gemara was so geschmack, was given with such a bren, with such excitement, that it mesmerized me. And not only did he give a shir with a geschmack, but he also told jokes, real good jokes, in the middle. And we all laughed, and I saw a beautiful combination of Torah, a beautiful combination of enjoyment in Torah, and I was just saying to myself, wow, that's impressive. And the Rav said to me, he said, I just want to let you know, that person is a lawyer. So really, from then on till this day, he's the type of person I try and emulate. Can't reach his shoelaces, but at least I try and emulate him. And the Adas has those type of people in its congregation, and it has those type of people giving shiurim. When you look at the Adas carefully, you'll see that for the most part it's comprised of people who are balabatim. There are not that many what we would call kollel members in the shul. There was not a large number of mechanchim. It was for the most part working people. But all of them shared one goal, and that was to be Jews who were doing the mitzvahs as best they can, doing chesed as best they can, all the time. But they were also koivei itim leparnasa. They spent a certain amount of time that they had to support their families, but otherwise it was, what kind of mitzvah can we do? What kind of chesed can we do? And so when you would take a look around the shul, you would see people like Baruch Zone, Official Firestone, people who are constantly learning. But they worked at the same time to support their families, to pay the bills. You can take a look to this very day. We have individuals in this shul, like Avram David Sauer, who's so involved in Hatzalah. You have Mayor Gutman, who does work, tremendous work for Achnos Tzarchim. People who work, but understand that work is not the ikar of life. It is just something that's necessary, but that the main part of life is the chesed, it's the Torah that we do. And that, for the most part, is a common denominator among all members of the shul. And it's a special thing to see, especially if you're going to become a lawyer. And it's why I feel so very comfortable in this shul. Another beautiful thing about the Adas is the shalom that exists in the Adas. You don't hear criticism. Everybody gets along with each other. And everybody respects each other. We don't look at what size yarmulke or the type of yarmulke they're wearing. I don't think we look at whether the tzitzis are out or not out. We look to see an individual who wants to grow, who wants to increase their level of ruchnius. That's the ikar. And if those things are there, we love you, and you're part of the shul. That's something that I think makes this shul unique. As some of you may know, recently I was part of a committee where we're trying to bring in some of the younger members. This committee consisted of 3 other individuals, and there was never any discussion of left wing or right wing, or what kind of Jew are we looking to bring in to the Adas. And that's because we share the same goals. And that's a special feature of this shul. Another thing that always impressed me about the Adas was the fact that it's a shul that understands its place. It is not a large shul, and by the same token it doesn't want to become a large shul. It's happy being what it is. It's a place where one can improve your davening. It's a place where you can go to a shir and improve your ruchnius. It's a place where you feel comfortable with the surroundings that you're in. As I said earlier, it is not by any means a fancy shul. We don't have a fancy building. But by the same token, it's a shul that spends its money on those things that are important, such as having beautiful Sifrei Torah. And lastly, and I think in many ways most important, we all are familiar with the phrase, Im ein kemach, ein Torah. And that simply means if we don't have food, we can't survive. You can't survive in Torah. Now, I might be shot for saying this, but in our shul, we're zeicha to have, clearly, the best cholent in town. Some of you might not think that's an ikr, but I think we all understand that it is. Im ein kemach, ein Torah. And so, for the record, I want to thank Mr. Shavrik for all those delicious cholents. I'm not saying that's what brings me to the Adas. Clearly, it's not the most important thing. Probably the second most important thing.
In many years, the Adas was formed in the early 1900s by a group of very dedicated people. And the dedicated people set as a foundation a community-wide organization called the Adas. The shul was part of that organization, was the beginning of the organization. And they set forth with real values, purity of heart, and a tremendous amount of work in the former years before there were yeshivas and day schools in Baltimore. And as we can see today, they succeeded. We stand now, many years later, almost a whole century later from when they started, and we see that the fruits of their labor turn into a true reality and something very, very special. When you shoot an arrow and the arrow is a little bit off from the very beginning, you don't notice it then. You only notice it when it's far down the road, how far off it is from its mark. But when it's exactly on the mark many years later, you know that the original start was accurate and on the mark from the very beginning. And it's clear that the purity of heart, the Yiras Shamayim, the fear of God that they had in them, directed them and allowed them to build a really, really Torah-dik foundation, pure, and that's why we have the Adas today in the midst of our community, still running as a shul primarily, but bringing in people to learning Torah, to davening, and feeling part of a community as we know it today. There's especially on a personal note, a personal honor, to be a grandson of one of those founders. My grandfather, Olav Shalom, Mr. Mar Siegel, was one of those founders. And my being a Rav here in this Kehillah many years takes on a special meaning to me on a personal level. It sort of makes one feel like it's like in the blood of a person when their ancestors were the ones that formed and founded this institution, this beautiful Torah institution. It makes one feel a little bit closer, that much more closer to what is taking place in the shul, and gives a person the feeling of connection, very deep connection to what the shul has to offer. Today, obviously, times are different, the challenges are different. Then they were challenged with keeping Shabbos and being able to have parnasa, be able to work, and all the basics of Judaism. They were there to build. We're not challenged today with the actual keeping of Shabbos, but we are challenged with how we keep Shabbos. We are challenged with how we're learning and how we're davening and mitzvahs. We're aware of them and we're committed to them. Our challenges, especially in the society around us, our challenges are to withstand the infiltration of the values that are around us, which society has clearly deteriorated over the years. And it's our job as a community and through the shul and everything that we do to hold on to that value system and to keep it as pure as possible. We have, as a help to us, obviously, the foundation, but we have to stand on that and move forward with it. And the challenges, as I said, are a little bit different, although the answers are the same. We go back to the Torah, we go back to the source to see what it is that Hashem wants from us, and we do the best that we can to hold on to it as pure as possible. As a Rav of the shul, being part of the history now, the continuation of that history, obviously it's a challenge to maintain that purity of what was set out in the very beginning and to maintain that. And Baruch Hashem, the Kehillah, as a general, has maintained it. Yes, the Rav of the shul, but the shul is a very, very special Kehillah in its own right. We have amazingly special people. We don't have large numbers in our kehillah, but we are very large in what we do and what we accomplish in Torah and mitzvahs and chesed, and reaching out in our own personal development, both as individuals and as a community. It's a true honor to be a Rav of such a kehillah. We share the value systems. We don't have to convince that we have to keep Shabbos anymore. We understand it all together, united. We've always, through the generations, had a very, very special kehillah, members of very special levels of Torah understanding, commitments to Yiddishkeit, and therefore it's a true honor for me to be part of such a kehillah. It allows us to take the values that were instilled in the foundation of the formation of the shul, to build on it, to look back at it and be inspired by it, and to take it further, to be able to apply those values to the challenges that we have in front of us now. And we do have challenges. We live in a society where we are bombarded from the outside, and we have to maintain ourselves through this difficult gulus that we live in. It is a challenging time, but Baruch Hashem, the Adas has always been, and Mitzvah will continue to be, a place where a person walks in to our kehillah and feels at home, and feels at ease, and feels like one belongs there. And by doing so, it helps as a group, as a kehillah, and as individuals. It allows us to maintain ourselves, our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and our relationship to fellow Jew and all around us. It allows us to hold on to that in a very, very strong way. It allows us to grow and come closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom through our learning, through our davening, and through our mitzvahs, and through our chesed, and all that we do. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the strength and the wisdom to be able to meet these challenges. As I said, we, Baruch Hashem, have a foundation to stand on. So it's our job to stand on that foundation and to reach forward and to reach to higher lights. The Rebbeinu Shalom should give us Asiyata Deshmaya. We should reach those heights, be able to grow ourselves, not only in numbers, but more importantly of who we are and how we view a world, and how we live in a world, how we relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our fellow Jew.